Roughly 20,000 years ago, during the freezing climax of the last glacial maximum, the Eurasian steppe was one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. Massive glaciers stretched across northern continents, locking vast quantities of water and ice and reducing sea levels worldwide. Across these windswept, treeless tundras, small bands of nomadic humans fought for survival alongside a formidable array of Pleistocene megafauna. In this harsh landscape, humans were far from the undisputed rulers of the natural world. We shared the biome with powerful apex predators, cave lions, giant hyenas, saber-toothed cats, and above all, the gray wolf, Canis lupus. Wolves and humans were direct ecological competitors. Both species were social, highly intelligent pack hunters that relied on endurance running, strategic coordination, and collective communication to bring down large prey like reindeer, wild horses, bison, and woolly mammoths. By every law of evolutionary ecology, two top-tier social predators competing for the exact same prey in a resource-scarce environment should have driven each other away, or fought to the death until one was eradicated. Yet against all biological odds, something extraordinary occurred. Rather than remaining perpetual rivals, a subset of gray wolves and human hunter-gatherers began to forge an unprecedented biological alliance. That alliance transformed a lethal Ice Age predator into the domestic dog, Canis lupus familiaris, the first species, plant or animal ever domesticated by humanity. This transformation occurred thousands of years before the invention of agriculture, long before humans built permanent settlements, forged metals, or recorded written history. Every other domesticated animal, cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, and horses, was brought into the human sphere after the rise of farming. The dog was different. The dog was born in the deep wild, forged in the cold of the Paleolithic. How did a lethal carnivore become our closest companion? For decades, popular culture embraced a simple, heroic narrative. A Paleolithic hunter came across a wolf den, stole a litter of helpless pups, brought them back to camp, and raised them as pets or hunting aids. But modern animal behavior, genetics, and evolutionary biology demonstrate that this adoption hypothesis is almost certainly a myth. Attempts by modern wildlife biologists to hand-raise wild wolf pups from birth demonstrate that wolves never truly become dogs. Even when bottle-fed and handled by humans from the moment their eyes open, wild wolf pups retain their innate wild instincts as they mature. Around 8 to 12 weeks of age, their fear response develops rapidly. As adults, hand-raised wolves remain intensely independent, highly fearful of unfamiliar humans, prone to predatory stress, and fundamentally resistant to human social cues like pointing or eye contact. An ancient human band capturing wild wolf pups would have found themselves with destructive, dangerous adult predators that possess no inherent impulse to obey human authority or protect a human family. The reality of how wolves became dogs is far more subtle, complex, and remarkable. It was not a story of human conquest or conscious design, but a multi-generational process driven by a force evolutionary biologists call commensal self-domestication. To understand how self-domestication works, we must look at the landscape from the wolf's perspective. Paleolithic human camps were noisy, smelly, and dangerous places, surrounded by fire and weapons, but they were also rich sources of high-calorie waste. When human hunters brought down a mammoth or a herd of reindeer, they processed the carcasses on site, leaving behind pile after pile of discarded bones, cartilage, tough hide, and megafaunal offal. For a wolf pack struggling through a harsh glacial winter, these human refuse heaps represented a predictable, low-risk food source. However, approaching a human camp required overcoming a massive psychological barrier: fear. Within any wild wolf population, individual personalities exist on a spectrum. Some wolves are bold and hyper-aggressive. Others are extremely skittish and flee at the slightest sign of danger. But a small minority possess a unique behavioral trait: a lower fear response coupled with reduced flight distance. These were individuals whose fight or flight threshold was calibrated differently. While the majority of the pack fled when humans approached, these slightly calmer, less fearful wolves stayed nearby, scavenging the nutritious scraps left at the perimeter of the campsite. Access to this steady supply of human waste gave these tamer wolves a distinct survival advantage, particularly during harsh winters when live prey was scarce. They survived in higher numbers, reproduced more successfully, and passed their lower stress reactivity onto their offspring. Over dozens of generations, a distinct subpopulation of wolves began to split off from the wild pack. They were not being bred by humans in cages or enclosures. They were adapting themselves to an ecological niche that humans unwittingly created. They became camp followers, living alongside humans in a state of commensalism, an ecological relationship where one species benefits while the other is neither harmed nor helped. As these scavengers moved closer to human settlements, the nature of the interaction shifted from passive coexistence to active mutual benefit. In the open Pleistocene landscape, a human band sleeping in temporary shelters was vulnerable to surprise attacks from cave hyenas, bears, or rival human groups. Commensal wolves, possessing far superior senses of smell and hearing, served as an early warning system. Whenever a threat approached in the dark, the wolves surrounding the camp would bark or growl, alerting the human inhabitants. Furthermore, humans quickly realized the tactical value of having semi-tame wolves nearby during hunts. While humans possessed long-range projectile weapons like spears and spear throwers, we lacked the speed to catch wounded prey and the jaw strength to hold large animals at bay. Wolves possessed the speed and killing power, but lacked long-range weaponry. When humans and camp-following wolves began tracking prey together, their combined efficiency eclipsed that of any single predator on the continent. Humans could wound an animal from a distance, and the wolves could track the blood trail, corner the prey, and hold it until the hunters arrived to finish the kill. This mutualistic feedback loop accelerated the bond. Humans began to actively tolerate and eventually encourage the presence of the friendliest wolves. Pups born near human camps grew up accustomed to the sight, sound, and smell of humans, creating the conditions for full domestication. As behavioral selection for tameness intensified, an unexpected biological phenomenon began to unfold, one that physically reshaped the wolf into a dog. In the 1950s, Russian geneticist Dmitry Belyaev initiated a famous long-term experiment on silver foxes, Vulpes vulpes, at the Institute of Cytology and Genetics in Novosibirsk, Siberia. Belyaev wanted to test whether selecting purely for one behavioral trait, low aggression and fear toward humans, could trigger a cascade of physical changes. The results were astonishing. Within just a few generations of selecting only the tamest foxes, the animals not only became eager for human affection, but their physical appearance began to transform dramatically. Their coats developed piebald spots of white fur, their ears became floppy, their tails began to curl over their backs, their snouts shortened, and their skulls became smaller and broader. This collection of physical traits accompanying behavioral tameness is known to science as domestication syndrome. For decades, scientists struggled to explain why selecting for a mental trait like tameness would alter a creature's physical appearance. The answer arrived through modern developmental biology: neural crest cells. Neural crest cells are a specialized group of stem cells in early vertebrate embryos. During embryonic development, these cells migrate along specific pathways throughout the body, helping form the adrenal glands, which produce adrenaline and control the fight-or-flight response, as well as the cartilage of the ears, the bones of the face, pigment-producing cells in the skin and fur and teeth. When early wolves were selected for tameness, humans were unintentionally selecting for individuals with mild deficits in neural crest cell development. With fewer neural crest cells reaching the adrenal glands, the animals produced less adrenaline, making them calmer and less aggressive. But because those same neural crest cells also construct facial bones, ear cartilage, and skin pigmentation, the reduction had unintended physical side effects. Their faces shortened, their teeth grew smaller, their ear cartilage weakened into floppy folds, and their uniform camouflage coats broke down into spotted patterns. The fierce, long-snouted, sharp-eared Pleistocene wolf was morphologically melting down, yielding a creature whose physical features remained permanently juvenile, a biological state known as neoteny. The dog was taking physical shape. Determining precisely when and where this transformation occurred has been one of the most contentious debates in modern science. For decades, archaeologists relied on physical bones, morphological analysis of fossilized skulls, to identify the earliest dogs. But telling an early dog from a late Pleistocene wolf using bone fragments alone is exceptionally difficult. Early dogs still looked very much like wolves, and wild Pleistocene wolves possessed significant natural variation in skull shape and size. Several controversial fossil discoveries highlighted this difficulty. In Goyet Cave in Belgium, researchers discovered a large canid skull dated to approximately 36,000 years ago, which some paleontologists argued showed dog-like features such as a shortened snout and a wider brain case. Similar early claims were made for canid remains found at Předmostí in the Czech Republic, dated to around 27,000 years ago, where a skull was found with what appeared to be a mammoth bone intentionally placed in its mouth. However, recent genetic analyses and high-resolution 3D geometric morphometrics have challenged these early dates. Many geneticists and paleontologists now view the Goyet and Předmostí specimens not as true domestic dogs, dogs, but as members of extinct specialized megafaunal wolf lineages that naturally possess shorter snouts and heavier jaws to crush mammoth and rhino bones. The true, unambiguous archaeological signature of domestication emerges slightly later in the fossil record, between 14,000 and 16,000 years ago, and it is marked not just by bone shape, but by unmistakable evidence of emotional attachment and burial care. One of the most remarkable archaeological sites in the story of dog domestication is Bonn-Ober Castle in western Germany. In 1914, quarry workers uncovered a Paleolithic grave containing the skeletons of a man, a woman, and a canid dated to approximately 14,000 years ago. Re-examination of the Bonn-Ober Castle canid by paleontologist Leanne Giemsch and her team revealed that it was a young dog, roughly 7.5 months old at the time of its death. Detailed examination of the dog's teeth revealed that it had contracted canine distemper, a severe, often fatal viral disease, when it was just 3 to 4 months old. The pathological evidence showed that the puppy suffered through 3 distinct waves of life-threatening illness, experiencing severe fever, neurological distress, and gastrointestinal devastation. To survive for additional months while critically ill, this puppy required intensive human nursing. Paleolithic humans had to keep the young dog warm, clean its sores, feed it water and soft food, and protect it from predators when it was far too sick to provide any utility as a hunter or guard. When the puppy finally died, the community buried it with reverence alongside 2 adult humans, spraying the bodies with red ochre, a sacred burial pigment used across the Paleolithic world. The Bonn-Ober Castle discovery provides definitive proof that by 14,000 years ago, the relationship between humans and dogs had transcended mere functional utility. It was an emotional bond. Humans saw this young animal not merely as a tool or a food source, but as an individual member of their social group worthy of care, compassion, and a formal burial. A similar discovery from Ain Malaha in modern-day Israel, associated with the Natufian culture and dated to roughly 12,000 years ago, revealed an elderly human buried in a fetal position with their hand resting gently atop the skeleton of a puppy. The human fingers were intertwined with the small ribs of the dog, capturing a physical touch frozen in time for 12 millennia. While archaeology provides tangible snapshots of human-dog interactions, the ancient DNA revolution has fundamentally transformed our understanding of the geography and genetic timing of dog domestication. By extracting and sequencing ancient DNA from hundreds of prehistoric wolf and dog fossils across Eurasia and the Americas, geneticists have reconstructed the deep evolutionary tree of Canis familiaris. In 2020 and 2021, landmark genetic studies led by researchers such as Anders Bergstrom, Pontus Skoglund, and Angela Perry synthesized massive datasets of ancient canid genomes. Their findings overturned long-standing debates and painted a dramatically clearer picture of our shared history. First, genomic evidence proved conclusively that all modern dogs, from the tiny Chihuahua to the massive English Mastiff, descend from a single wild species, the gray wolf. However, modern dogs do not descend from any living population of gray wolves found today. Instead, dogs stem from a now extinct lineage of late Pleistocene wolves that inhabited Eurasia during the last glacial maximum. Second, the genetic clock indicates that the divergence between wolves and the ancestors of modern dogs occurred between 20,000 and 30,000 years ago. This timeline coincides perfectly with the coldest phase of the last ice age, a period when severe climate conditions pushed both human hunter-gatherers and wolf populations into overlapping survival refugia across Eurasia. Third, ancient DNA revealed a fascinating geographic complexity. Early dogs appeared to have possessed dual ancestry. Ancient dog genomes show genetic contributions from 2 distinct ancient wolf populations, one related to Eastern Eurasian wolves and another related to Western Eurasian wolves. Whether this dual ancestry reflects a single domestication event involving a deeply structured, interconnected wolf population spanning Eurasia, or 2 separate domestication events in the East and West that later merged through human trade and migration, remains a central question actively investigated by paleogenomicists. What is beyond dispute, however, is the astounding speed with which dogs spread across the globe once the bond was forged. When the indigenous ancestors of Native Americans crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia into North America over 15,000 years ago, they did not make the journey alone. Genetic analysis of ancient American dog remains, such as those found at the Coster site in Illinois, dated to roughly 10,000 years ago, proves that these animals were true domestic dogs, possessing genetic signatures directly linking them to ancient Siberian dog lineages. Dogs were not domesticated separately in the Americas. They crossed the icy northern corridor alongside human bands, trotting beside them into an entire entirely new continent. By the time agriculture was taking root in the Fertile Crescent, dogs were already guarding campsites, pulling travois sleds, and hunting game on every inhabited continent on Earth except Antarctica. As humans and dogs lived together over thousands of years, the selection pressures acting on both species began to converge. We altered their biology, but they also reshaped ours in ways that science is only now beginning to fully appreciate. One of the most remarkable examples of this biological coevolution is written in the neurochemistry of social bonding. In 2015, a team of Japanese researchers led by Miho Nagasawa published a groundbreaking study in the journal Science examining the hormonal mechanics of the human-dog relationship. Nagasawa and her colleagues investigated the role of oxytocin, a powerful neuropeptide often called the bonding hormone. In humans, oxytocin plays a fundamental role in mother-infant bonding. When a mother looks into her newborn baby's eyes, a surge of oxytocin is released in her brain, triggering feelings of love, protection, and attachment. Crucially, the baby's brain responds by releasing its own oxytocin, creating a positive neurochemical feedback loop that reinforces the lifelong parent-child bond. Nagasawa tested what happens when dogs gaze into the eyes of their human owners. They discovered that when a dog stares into a human's eyes, it triggers a dramatic spike in oxytocin levels in the human's brain. In response, the human feels an impulse to stroke, talk to, or comfort the dog, which in turn triggers a simultaneous release of oxytocin in the dog's brain. This mutual oxytocin gaze loop is unique to dogs. When Nagasawa repeated the experiment with hand-raised tame wolves, no such oxytocin loop occurred. Wolves generally interpret prolonged, direct eye contact as a threat or a challenge for dominance. Somehow, during the process of domestication, dogs hijacked an ancient biological bonding mechanism that humans had evolved exclusively for raising human children. They evolved the unique ability to make direct, non-threatening eye contact with humans, opening a biochemical channel to our emotional core. This emotional bridge is further supported by structural adaptations in canine facial anatomy. Anatomical studies led by evolutionary psychologist Julianne Kaminsky revealed that domestic dogs possess a specialized facial muscle, the levator anguli oculi medialis, that is virtually absent in wild wolves. This tiny muscle allows dogs to raise their inner eyebrows, making their eyes appear larger, more childlike, and sadder, a movement often called puppy dog eyes. When a dog raises its inner eyebrows, it triggers an involuntary nurturing response in human observers, making us far more likely to feed, protect, and care for the animal. While dogs were developing neurochemical and facial mechanisms to bond with humans, their internal digestive systems were undergoing a parallel genetic revolution to match our changing diets. For tens of thousands of years, both humans and dogs ate high-protein, meat-heavy diets. But roughly 10,000 years ago, human societies in the Fertile Crescent, East Asia, and Mesoamerica underwent the agricultural revolution. Humans began clearing fields, planting wild grains, and settling into permanent villages. As human diets shifted dramatically toward plant-based starches like wheat, barley, rice, and corn, the waste surrounding human settlements changed. Instead of meaty carcasses, agricultural refuse heaps were filled with starchy food scraps and grain mash. In 2013, a team of evolutionary geneticists led by Erik Axelsson at Uppsala University in Sweden published a study comparing the complete genomes of wolves and domestic dogs to identify the genetic changes that allowed dogs to thrive alongside early farmers. Axelsson discovered that domestic dogs possess a massive expansion in the number of copies of the AMY2B gene, which codes for pancreatic amylase, the primary enzyme responsible for breaking down dietary starch in the small intestine. While wild wolves typically possess only 2 copies of the AMY2B gene, modern domestic dogs carry anywhere from 4 to 30 copies. This genetic expansion increased a dog's ability to digest starchy carbohydrates by up to 30 times compared to wild wolves. Dogs that could efficiently extract energy from human agricultural scraps survived and thrived in farming villages, while those that required a purely carnivorous diet struggled. Just as humans evolved additional copies of salivary amylase genes, AMY1, to process the products of early agriculture, our dogs evolved right alongside us, adapting their metabolic machinery to match the food on our tables. Today, there are an estimated 1 billion domestic dogs on Earth, living in virtually every culture, climate, and biome where humans exist. They serve as search and rescue partners, service animals, livestock guardians, therapy companions, and cherished family members. The story of how wolves became dogs is not not merely a chapter in natural history, it is a fundamental pillar of human history. Without the dog, the trajectory of human civilization might have been radically different. In the dark, cold world of the Ice Age, dogs provided the alarm systems that protected our vulnerable camps. They provided the extra hunting power that allowed small human bands to secure calories in brutal glacial environments. They carried our loads across frozen landscapes, guarded our early livestock from wild predators, and offered warmth and comfort during nights when survival hung in the balance. In return, we offered them a place by our fires, a share of our food, and a permanent home within our social world. When we look into the eyes of a dog today, we are not looking at a wild beast that we conquered and chained. We are looking into a biological mirror, a creature whose body, mind, and genetics were shaped by tens of thousands of years of shared survival alongside us. The wolf did not lose its freedom when it came in from the cold. It chose a new path. In doing so, it became the first species to join us on our journey out of the Ice Age, and in the process, change both of our species forever.